It's one thing to talk at your children and say, do this, but it's different when you are setting the example, when you are modeling what you want your children to become. And indeed, my parents definitely did that because it did help to shape me.
Take control of your life. Break the chains and rise. No more feeling powerless. No more shame. Take your power. Break out of the pain. Because it's more than fornication. More than procreation. It's not just self-stimulation. Sex energy is for creation and transformation into a new destination.
This is Porn Talk.
Porn Talk. Yeah. Change your heart from dark to light. Porn Talk. Yeah. Break free. Take back your power and rise. I said take back your power. I said take back your power. Take back your power and rise.
This is Porn Talk. Here is your host, Eric Zuzack.
Welcome to Porn Talk. This is Powerful Eric. This show is not just about breaking addictions. It's about breaking belief systems. We are bound by self-imposed and societal chains. Break those rusty, nasty old chains. Get inspired right now. Today, we're about to delve into a subject that has puzzled humanity since the dawn of time: relationships and the art of dating, sex, and of course, porn. It's like finally cracking that code you've been trying to decipher, but this time it's all about uncovering the secrets to navigating love, sex, and relationships. Get ready to be inspired as we take a journey toward a 49-year-old virgin who now's a bona fide guru, relationship guru. Joining us is Dr. Paula C. Perez, armed with a 4-step framework that's nothing short of revolutionary. Dr. Paula, a seasoned motivational speaker with over 3 decades of experience in the world of education, is on a mission to guide women and men through the maze of dating and towards the fulfilling relationships they've been dreaming of. We're diving into the realm of God's timing, cultivating healthy boundaries, and tapping into our hidden strengths. So, if you're ready to unravel the mysteries of dating while staying true to your faith, you're in the right place. Dr. Paula is here to drop some serious wisdom that will not only transform your approach to relationships, but also resonate deeply within. Without further ado, let's extend a warm welcome to our guest, Dr. Paula C. Perez, as she shares her insights and experiences on this enlightening episode of Porn Talk. Welcome, Dr. Paula.
Hey, Powerful Eric, how are you?
Awesome. As you know, I'm excited to delve into this topic. So tell us, of course, people with the title, the 49-year-old virgin, people are dying to know. Tell us a little about yourself. What's your story?
Well, let me start by saying it was not my plan to be a 49-year-old virgin, but let me backtrack and start with my story. Many people are familiar with the movie, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and obviously that's something that I can relate to. But unlike the character there, I wasn't trying to lose my virginity. I wanted to develop a healthy and satisfying marriage relationship. And for me, that meant not having sex until I got married. That was a decision I made at 16. I actually signed a contract with my dad. But when I signed the contract, I really thought my life would mirror that of my parents, that I would go to college and soon after marry the love of my life. But that didn't happen. It was 33 years later when I finally met and married my husband. But it was a journey. I was born in the 60s. In fact, we lived about 15, 20 minutes from Woodstock.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So I was born in the time where this great big sexual revolution was happening.
Yeah. Free.
And I'll tell you, I mean, burning bras and all of that, that was the time when I was brought into this world. I was born in 61. So I was old enough to understand and to recognize Woodstock. But my parents, they were determined to change our family. In the book that I have a book that I wrote about my journey. And in that book, I share many of the stories of family members. And my parents wanted to change that narrative. They started it and they wanted it to continue with their children. So let me give you a little background. I had a grandfather that when he was 16, already had 3 kids, with a 4th on the way.
Wow.
And my great grandmother made him marry the woman that was carrying the child. It was her 2nd child with him. So I guess my grandmother figured, well, he must like her a little more. I had another grandmother at 16, was traumatically violated, raped, and that resulted in a pregnancy. So at 15, she was raped. At 16, she had the child.
Wow.
And throughout our family lineage, we have a number of people that have had children out of wedlock. And my parents just didn't want that for me. So I remember at the age of 11, my mom was pregnant with my youngest sibling. And back then we had radiators, and younger people probably don't even know what they are. But it was an iron looking device that you can literally sit on, and it radiated heat. It wasn't on. So we were sitting on that. And my mom decided to use that moment when I was 11 to talk to me about the birds and the bees. So my mom's a nurse, and she literally had illustrations of body parts and went through the terminology and said to me that sex is phenomenal. And you know why it is? Because God created it, and everything God made is good. But he made it to be held in a certain container, and that container is marriage. So we want you to know about sex. We want you to know how everything works. However, we don't want you to do it until you get married. And those were lessons that they repeated over and over and over. So when I was 16, that was the age when I decided, yeah, I want that for my life. Because I watched as many cousins and aunts had pregnancies out of wedlock. And even at the tender age of 16, I realized the impact that it had on many of my cousins. Many of them didn't know their fathers. Their fathers didn't want to have anything to do with them. Others that were there, the parents, because they weren't together, they were constantly bickering, arguing. And I love children. That's one reason why I went into education. And to see the impact that that type of stress has on a child, I didn't want that. I did not want to do that to another human being. So that was why I made the decision. And it wasn't always easy. As I said, it was the 60s, the 70s. Everybody was doing it. Women were free. Birth control was easily accessible.
Right.
So why not screw around?
Yeah.
Let's have some fun. But for me, that's not what I desired. Now, there were times when I was totally tempted. I remember when I first went off to college. I lived a very sheltered life. So when I went away to school, as many young people, I stopped going to church because I went to church all the time growing up. But when I went to college, that was my act of rebellion. I'm not going to go. And one of the people that I met, I had the opportunity to go to this college when I was a junior in high school for 3 weeks. And that's when I made my decision that I wanted to go there. I thought I wanted to be an engineer, so I went to RPI. But that summer before my senior year, I met a bunch of upperclassmen. So when I enrolled as a freshman, many of them were still there. And I remember going to a party at a guy's house, and we were playing games and just having a lot of fun. Everybody else left. And then I was left there alone. And he started kissing me. He started on my earlobe, my neck. And then at a moment, he literally jumped up and said, "Go home, Paula. Go home." And I was like, what is going on? Why is he sending me home? I had no clue. I was so naive. But I just felt, okay, God was protecting me. He watched over me. And there were many times in my freshman year, especially, when I had that experience where people were just looking out for me. I remember going to a party and they had spiked the punch and they knew that I didn't drink. And this same guy happened to be there. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm getting ready to have some punch." He said, "It's spiked." So throughout my journey, I had people that were just there. And I don't even know that they realized how much they were protecting me. But that's what happened. So I learned my lessons. There are certain things that I didn't want to do, certain things I didn't want to be around. And it was interesting. But then I have a younger brother. I'm the eldest of four. And one of my younger brothers got married. And that's when things turned for me. I remember feeling like, okay, I'm happy for my brother, but I'm the oldest. I should be the first one. I was the eldest grandchild on one side and the fourth oldest on another. And just felt if anybody's going to get married, it should be me. But it was my brother. But that sent me into a tailspin, almost in a desperation to get into a relationship. And I developed a reputation of Paula's just looking for a man. And I was. In that season of my life, I was.
Mm-hmm.
But then I remember getting to a point where I realized there's more to life. There's more to life than the pursuit of a relationship. There's more to life than just trying to chase after this dream. And I started pouring into myself. That's when I went and furthered my education. I got my doctorate. I started teaching. I started not-for-profit organizations. I worked with single groups. I did women's retreats, did all the things, and really got to the point where I loved my life. There was freedom and joy in being able to travel, to go when I wanted, to be able to help and pour into other people without having to check in with a mate. And I really got to the point where I loved my life and just went on living. So I'm talking a lot. Sorry about that.
No, that's why we're here. It's talk is the second word in the podcast. So I can really commend your parents because they saw all this carnage around them, of all this, getting pregnant so early and fathers not being around. And so they wanted something different for you. So that's really awesome.
Definitely. I credit them with so much of who I am today, because it's one thing to talk at your children and say, do this, but it's different when you are setting the example, when you are modeling what you want your children to become. And indeed, my parents definitely did that. They're wonderful. Thank God they're still with us. Very, very active, very much alive. And I still, they're my closest people, with my husband, of course. But I appreciate the values that they instilled at that very young age, because it did help to shape me. And think about the time. Again, it was the 60s. It was the 70s. I remember all of the shows that were starting to come on. They had, what was the show when they had Sock It to Me in what was the name of that?
Laugh-Ins.
Yes, Laugh-Ins. And all of the sexual undertones of the jokes. I remember those types of things. And I was still young. It was the time when you first begin to see divorcees. One of my favorite sitcoms was Julia. And Julia was a divorced young Black woman that was a nurse, a professional woman, with a son named Corey. So, you start to see where media begins to change. And it's so interesting. If you want to know where you're going to be in 4 or 5 years, look at what's happening on TV now, because it often serves as a precursor to what really unfolds in life. So my parents, I really appreciated what they did and how they try to root us and ground us in solid values.
Yeah. And the reason I was bringing that up is because you had mentioned all the fathers that were not, were ignoring the family. They were completely absent. They weren't there. And I can say this 100%. All the guys that I work with either had an absent father or divorced, or maybe he is there, but he's just like unavailable. And all the guys I coach that addicted to porn or some type of sexual acting out, they all have a father that, let's just say, is not there.
Yeah.
And my case is a little different, but it's my dad's a great guy, but his mom and dad were really screwed up. My grandpa and grandpa had some serious challenges. And so he would escape in books. And so he never overcame that. At home, he'd always be in the basement, in his study, with his nose in his books. And so my mom would say that she would jokingly say that she was a widow to books. And unfortunately, how that carried over to me is, he was escaping into that. And I was not purposely, but I was ignored,
Right.
And so that was how he was absent to me. So father's not being there is huge.
It is major. It is major. As an educator, of course, I've worked with thousands of children over the year. I was the teacher at an elementary level, and then became a staff developer for teachers, a director over 7-8 elementary schools, and then ended my career as a principal. I was in principal of several different schools. In fact, I ended my career back at the elementary school that I attended as the principal. That's also where I did all of my teaching. So it's a full circle moment. But one of the things that always broke my heart is the young people, because they start to act out at such an early age. And parents don't realize the decisions that they make have a ripple effect. And they will impact a child, unless there are other safety networks around them. Not, I think about my dad's life, product of rape, father, of course, not around, poverty, just so many things. But because of the decisions that he made, he was able to rise above it. So I know it's possible. I know that you can literally change the lineage of a family in one generation, because my parents did it. But I also know that there are young people that have suffered. There's a study that's entitled ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, where they talk about 10 things that impact a child in their developmental years. And the absence of a parent is certainly one of them. The poverty is one. Someone that's involved with an addiction disorder is another thing that can impact. And just so many things. I don't even think adults realize that what you do today is going to impact somebody tomorrow. And for me, I just didn't want that. I'm the firstborn. I tend to be the compliant child. I want to do things right the first time. And so it was easy for me. And I guess because my dad was such a phenomenal, and is such a phenomenal dad, it made it easy for me to imagine a higher power, to imagine a spiritual person, a being that was there wanting the best for me and not wanting to disappoint him either. So, many of my decisions, I believe, were made because of the grounding that I got, because of the teaching, because of the network of people that I surrounded myself with. And I know that it's possible, but it's even more challenging today. I mean, think about it. When I was growing up, people that wanted to get into porn, you had to go to a store, you had to go to a neighbor's house and find a book.
Yep.
But it's not that way today. The kids, you click on the wrong button and you're exposed.
Yeah.
And because of the addictive nature of sex, I mean, that was the purpose. The purpose of sex was to connect you with another person. And that's why being in marriage, that's a wonderful thing. You want to be glued to your spouse. You want to desire to be with your spouse in a sexual way. But when you do that outside of those confines, it really does have an impact. And I think about the number of children today that are exposed to so much so early. People say, oh, well, I'm not going to have TV. I'm not going to put cable. You don't have to today. Anything you want to see, you can see on your phone.
Yeah. The other day, I was talking to someone about digital screens, devices, all those things. And he said he has 2 young girls, and he said, oh, I hate all that stuff. And what I said to him, I said, well, I don't give it to my kids. But they don't have it. I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. They do not have an iPad. They certainly don't have a phone. We do watch TV.
Mm-hmm.
At our house, they don't get them.
Exactly. I mean, it is so easy. You look at poor babies that have an obesity problem. Well, they didn't go to the store and buy the food. They didn't go into the refrigerator and make the food. An adult did that to them. Yeah. So as adults, we have so much more power than we often choose to exercise. And I applaud you for not putting that in a kid's hand. They don't have the maturity, the mental capacity to put restraints on the use. And I see so many parents that use the phone as a babysitter.
Yeah.
As a pacifier.
Yeah.
And again, I can't even imagine the stories that will unfold as this generation gets older and they start to share, well, mommy didn't know it, but when I was 5, mommy didn't know it, but when I was 8, I saw this. I tried this. And yeah, I feel for parents that are raising children in this generation. It's just a very different world.
Yeah. A friend of mine, this was some time ago, she said her and her granddaughter were looking up Disney stuff online, and they put in Disney princesses. And the little girl clicked on whatever, and it was porn. And so, like, people say, well, I'm not, my kid is not into that, or she wouldn't, look at that stuff. Well, they're going to stumble across it accidentally, at least, and definitely the friends are going to show it to them.
Exactly.
So you have to have that conversation about pornography. It's going to come up.
It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And you even think about the video games and all the back doors that are in these video games that are leading kids to pornographic sites. It is definitely out there. And it takes guidance. It takes an adult being involved to help navigate and help their children to know which direction. And many times when we do something that's wrong, we have that feeling in the pit of our stomach. We have that sense of guilt. We've got to teach our children to lean into that feeling. And whenever it arises, to go in the opposite direction. That means you shouldn't be doing it. That means leave it alone. So yeah, there's a lot to do. And again, my heart goes out to parents.
Yeah, it's certainly challenging, to say the least. You had mentioned earlier when we were talking about fatherless kids and them acting out at school. One of the ways of acting out, and it's usually solitary, is pornography. Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges that you saw with all the kids that you taught? What were some of the challenges that?
Oh my goodness. Especially my last 2 years as a principal, I started to see this younger and younger. My building was a pre-K through grade 4 school, roughly 350 kids.
Mhm.
And I remember that year having 5 kids in particular that were always on my radar. They were always acting out. They were always getting in trouble. And the types of activities that they were doing were usually sexual in nature.
Really?
Yes. Yes. Trying to do sexual acts on another child.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
What you're talking about right now, that is like the new thing now, because these very, very young kids are watching porn.
Yes.
And it is, they're trying to imitate it with another kid.
You got it.
Oh my gosh.
You got it.
Yeah.
So the lessons that we had to teach, my nurse and I were constantly trying to do good touch, bad touch. You know, you shouldn't be showing anything that your bathing suit can't cover. I mean, you know, just, it was heartbreaking. So I know that there are serious problems. And many times what blows me away, people assume that this is just a male issue, that this is a problem that just guys deal with. But I know for a fact women that are struggling with porn addictions as well.
Mm-hmm.
And again, because of the ubiquitous nature, many times they've gotten into relationships where their partner, that's what they want. And they think that will enhance their sexual experience if they imitate, if they watch and try to replicate what they're seeing on the screen. And because, first of all, it's fake,
Right.
you know, you can never achieve that. And oh my God, my heart goes out. Again, I know there are women that have also dealt with the struggle in this area. And I applaud you for doing this talk show, to being open and honest and sharing about this topic, because it is very much needed.
Well, thank you. And when I first started this, like, I thought it would be primarily guys listening, but it's not. I had at one time, I have children reach out to me, which is, I don't coach children, but I do have a great resource I send them to. He's a great guy. He wrote a book on the subject, but so I don't coach kids, but they do reach out. And at one time there was a 12-year-old girl that reached out, and it's just, it breaks my heart. And like, I have 2 little boys, and just the thought I recently, and I'm going to get off on a slight tangent here, saw the movie, The Sound of Freedom.
I haven't seen it.
It's a true story, and it's about a guy who, for a living, well, now he does it for a living, but he literally goes in guns a-blazing and saves kids from sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. And it is an incredible movie. It actually beat, at the time, the 2 came out about the same time, it beat Indiana Jones in the box office.
Oh, okay. So it's recent. It just came out. Yeah.
It's still out there. So please go see The Sound of Freedom. It will change your perspective on
Is that the movie with Jim Caviezel or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I know
it's outstanding. So, but the impact that it has on kids, like, I used to say there was a healthy use of porn, and after everything I learned, I just can't say it anymore.
That's for sure. That is for sure. Those images stick in your mind. I remember when I first graduated from college, I took a job at IBM and worked 3rd shift. So I lived maybe 7 minutes from the plant. So I would often go home, lunch then was 3:34 in the morning. I'd go home, get something to eat, turn the TV on. And one of those nights I turned on the TV and something pornographic jumped out, and I couldn't turn the TV fast enough. I am 61 years old. I still have that image in my head. You can't erase those types of things. And for me, it is so critical what we allow in through our senses.
Yeah.
And wow.
And the way I look at it is like a computer. They always say with programming, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And we're pouring all this garbage into our mind. So in some way, shape, or form, it's going to come out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're going to have to end here very soon, but what's some other challenges? Like, as a woman who was a virgin for 49 years, what was one of the bigger challenges that you had? And, what's
I think early on in my relationship, especially when relationships weren't working out, I had to get to the point where I was questioning, well, is it me? Am I the problem? Why don't people like me? Why don't people want to love me? And I went through a season where it really challenged my self-esteem. It really challenged my my sense of confidence in my own abilities, in my looks, all of that. And I think that was a pressure because society expects you to do certain things at certain times. I remember at my brother's wedding, while we were at the reception, one of the women said to me, "So when are we going to have some cake?" And I'm looking at her like, well, they're going to cut the cake in a few. I don't know, whenever the waiters bring. Oh, and she says, no, I'm talking about your cake. And I was so annoyed that she would say that she would ask that type of question. And many of the older women in my life would often do that. Like, you're 30, why aren't you married? You're 35, why aren't you married? You're 40, why aren't you married? You know, those questions coming over and over and over again, as if I had control over when I said I do to somebody. So that was a challenge. I think the other challenge was just the world is made for couples. The world is made for married people. You think about rates for hotels. You don't get a discount because you're single. If anything, you're paying more. The challenge of often being the third wheel, because going into my 40s, the vast majority, in fact, no, not the vast majority, most of the people that I was in a circle with were married. So then what do you do with your single friend as you have these married couples going off and doing things? I remember my sister-in-law planning a Valentine's event and inviting someone else that was not married, but she didn't invite me. And she said, well, you're not with anybody. And I was like, well, I could find somebody to go to it. So just feeling left out, feeling like, what's wrong with me? And for me, one of the things that I did, I got into videography at a very early age, in my early 20s, and partly because it was an excuse to be in the presence of people, but not on the receiving end of the questions, because I had the camera. I was the one asking the questions and diving into their lives and what was going on. So it allowed me to be there, but not feel so uncomfortable because I didn't have a +1.
One of the things you said was, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And I know I certainly can relate to that question, what's wrong with me? Because I didn't get married till my 40s too. And, what's wrong with me? And, sometimes instead of going out to the real world, I would just escape into pornography. Mm-hmm. So those are some huge challenges, being single later in life. And we've brought up a lot of the challenges and problems, but Dr. Paula is going to be with us on the next episode, and we'll talk about some of the solutions. So Dr. Paula, I appreciate you being with us on this first part of the episode, and we'll look forward to having you back here shortly.
I look forward to it. We'll see you for part 2.
Thanks for listening. If you're struggling with porn or sex addiction, reach out to Eric at powerfuleric.com.